Ukrainian President Zelensky has made it clear where he sees his country's future, in the EU. On February 26th, following the Russian invasion, he called for his country's immediate admission to the European Union. On February 28th, Zelensky therefore signed an official application for EU membership. The EU states have expressed their solidarity with Ukraine's application for membership, and Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, literally said, "You are one of us and we want you in." But why is Ukraine not actually an EU member so far, even though it is one of the largest countries in Europe? Ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s and in the wake of the EU's eastward expansion, Kiev has hinted that Ukraine would like to join the EU. For example, Ukraine's foreign minister at the time already announced that the country was seeking integration into European and Euro-Atlantic structures. He said, quote, "Our full EU membership is our priority because it is the EU that will shape the image of Europe in the 21st century." In 1998, the first EU-Ukraine summit took place in Vienna, where Ukraine demanded a long-term EU accession perspective. The European Commission responded in 2001 by presenting a strategy paper for shaping its relations with Ukraine. The paper focused on supporting the country in structural and economic reforms. After Viktor Yushchenko won the runoff election for presidency in 2004, primarily because of his foreign policy course towards EU membership, the question of Ukraine's timely accession to the EU gained new momentum. Ukraine and the EU then signed an action plan in 2005, which, however, did not offer any real accession prospects for Ukraine, but rather revolved around economic issues. Viktor Yanukovych, who was elected in the presidential elections as early as 2010 and had already been accused of systematic electoral fraud in the 2004 elections, was subsequently elected as the new head of state. While he continued to be interested in EU membership, he also initiated major steps toward rapprochement with Russia. For example, he reaffirmed cooperation with the Eurasian Economic Union formed by Russia, Belarus and Kazakhstan. At the same time, however, Ukraine also wanted to form an association and free trade arrangement with the EU. However, the EU did not tolerate Ukraine's simultaneous membership in an economic union with Russia. Putin, on the other hand, declared that Russia would implement so-called protective measures in case of signing an EU agreement. So Ukraine had to make a choice. The Ukrainian president decided against an agreement with the EU, which came as quite a surprise to many Ukrainians and led to the months of demonstrations and protests of the so-called Euromaidan. These ultimately led to the fall of Yanukovych in February 2014. The newly elected government that followed concluded the EU agreement, which in the process was supposed to promote deeper political ties, stronger economic interdependence and respect for shared values, but at the same time a civil war began in the east of the country and Russia annexed Crimea. Due to the fact that Ukraine was now preoccupied with strong internal turmoil, it was not until 2018 that the Ukrainian parliament voted to firmly enshrine the goal of EU accession in the constitution. In 2019, this goal, along with that of NATO accession, was enshrined. Ukraine was preparing to formally apply for EU membership in 2024 in order to join the European Union in the 2030s. So here you can already see how elaborate and bureaucratic the process of joining the EU is. Before countries can become EU members, for example, they have to transpose the applicable EU laws into national law and fulfill a number of criteria. In the end, it is not the Commission alone that decides, but the 27 EU countries, which all have to unanimously give the green light. This process usually drags on for 10 years or even longer. Montenegro, Serbia and Turkey, for example, applied for membership over a decade ago and are still deadlocked in negotiations. Although the whole process could now be pushed through more quickly in the wake of the war, the conflict is also likely to be one of the main reasons why the EU will be so reluctant to admit Ukraine. So it remains to be seen how the war will develop further and how the EU's attitude will change accordingly. Incidentally, if Ukraine were to actually join the EU, it would be the poorest country within the Union, with a per capita GDP that would be around 1/3 that of Bulgaria, currently the poorest EU member. By geography and population, however, it would be one of the largest countries in the EU.